Hello dreamers, it's me, Delirium Dreamer, and we're here at week 2 of our Kaijune workshop series where we're talking about perspective and layout. I'm going to let you in on a couple of secrets. I'm a very stubborn artist, and when I first began my art journey, I was determined to not need many things like rulers and sketching, and I was just going to be the person that sat down and drew in pen and made things happen. I would just sit down with an image in my mind and just go for it. And then I took a geometry class, and my hatred for rulers grew even stronger because when I start getting thrown numbers, my brain does not do well. So when it came to having to use it for art, I didn't want something to cramp this creative flow that I needed to be in, because I felt like I had only blips and moments of time to get down what I was seeing in my head onto the paper before I lost it. So I would just make it happen. So over the years, I have learned that I need to start taking advice from people who significantly draw better than myself. It's just they've practiced art a little bit longer and they have applied certain techniques and skills longer. So I needed to understand more about what they did, and I needed to actually apply it into my own practices. So that's what I did. I was determined to get comfortable sketching. So I started to add sketching as a first step to every piece that I do. Adding sketching to your creative process can make such a huge difference. When you're making your kaiju piece, you take a piece of paper and you can fold it up into 6 equal parts, and you just kind of sit down and sketch out some rough ideas that you want to try. Because the other thing is that for the longest time, I didn't even consider what kind of perspective I even wanted. Didn't ask these, is this a 1-point perspective? So when you go in to make your pieces that you have in your mind, that is a question you want to make sure you have answered. What is my perspective for this piece? And you'll have a much more, what feels unified piece to look at. And I can show you a handful of pieces that I'm still proud of, but you can tell that the perspective is off. Now, the other thing, going back to the rulers, making sure that you use a ruler to do your perspective work is crucial. It's going to make sure that you're keeping everything in line. You don't need to have exact measurements, you just need to have it within that perspective. And you won't know what's in that perspective unless you've answered the question, what perspective are you drawing in? So, with all of this in mind, we're going to spend the next several minutes learning some things about drawing perspectives. It is going to be fairly basic. There are a million things to know about perspective, and you're going to continuously be working on this. I hope in the next several minutes you feel like you come out the other end feeling like you understand a little bit more and can confidently step into your kaiju creation, being able to map it out and lay it out even better. Let's begin. The class is in session. Let's talk basics. This is the simplest of information you need to understand about perspective and some of the tools you'll need. Perspectives have a horizon line, at least one vanishing point. Typically, there's also guiding lines. These are meant to help you keep the objects and subject matter within the perspective you need. We won't be doing too many guiding lines, but there will be some. All you need for this lesson is a ruler or straight edge tool, something to draw on like paper or a drawing tablet, and something to draw with like a pencil, and something to erase with. I will say when using a drawing tablet, a ruler can be handy, but we all know you can form a straight line pretty easy. Past this point, no matter what perspective you're doing, keep track of your vanishing points and guiding lines. 2-point perspective. Making a monster cube. Typically, most perspective layouts begin with a more neutral starting placement, drawing a horizon line in the middle of the page and a vertical line somewhere in there, usually in the center. When you strategically place these lines, though, you have a good starting place for an incredible piece. So we're going to do our big monster cube. In drawing something big, you're going to drop the horizon line lower. When setting up your horizon lines and guiding lines, be sure you don't draw them too dark, or if you're on a tablet, have them on a separate layer. Next, you'll draw a center line. This center line will become the center of your kaiju. Remember, you dropped the horizon line, so there will be an intentional smaller line below the horizon. That is where your monster friend's feet will end up. From there, you'll want to think about your monster in relationship to the things around him. Are there trees, lampposts, people? Getting a sense of scale so you can decide where you want the top of your monster's head to go. Next, you will be forming a box, taking that top point from our center line and connecting it to our vanishing points on the left and right. Your vanishing points are where things stop being discernible. This helps create that illusion of depth for your viewer. Next, you'll take that smaller line under the horizon and proceed to do the same thing, connecting it to your vanishing points. Next, you'll be starting to map out the monster cube, and depending on what shape your monster is, you can adjust this vertical line accordingly. In this example, we're showing a wider cube. If this were a tall, thin kaiju, you might bring these lines in closer. Next, you will begin connecting those new points to your vanishing points. A fair amount of these lines will end up erased. This is just a really great way to make sure your monster will be within the frame of your chosen perspective. All your lines coming from the left will connect to the vanishing point on the right, and all the lines coming from the right will connect to the vanishing point on the left. Next, we're going to take our slight mess and confusion of lines and bring forth the monster cube. We're gonna erase some of these lines. Now that we have our cube, you can start to imagine what kind of scene can be created here. One thing to be aware of is the top of your box. When making something big from this perspective, you never want to see the top of the big things. If you're in an airplane flying overhead, that's a different story, but we'll get to drawing smaller things soon. The other thing to note, in this perspective, you don't want to see the bottom of the box either. Otherwise, it gives the impression that your creature is floating. For fun, go ahead and add a small person in there so you start to see the scale of what you're drawing. In making something small, it's very similar to making something big. However, you'll be drawing below the horizon line instead of above it. Since Rich is planning to make this scene with a monster cube beside to really demonstrate scale, he puts his horizon line in the center of the page, verse higher or lower, so he has enough space to draw above and below the horizon line. He will determine the whereabouts of his first building, and from the vanishing point draw angling lines, intersecting at the desired corner of the first building. Following that, he will determine the height of his building, where he wants to see the roof in this instance, drawing a vertical line from where those lines intersect. Then, from the vanishing points again, he will draw angling lines stopping at the same corner as the building. Drawing two more vertical lines on either side of the corner line will determine the width of building. And from the points where those building lines intersect, you will draw a couple more angling lines to the appropriate vanishing points. Clean up the cube by erasing the lines you don't need, and voila! You've got a small cube. Well, smaller. We don't get the full sense of the small we're going for quite yet. We need to add something to help with that, so let's watch Rich work his magic while he adds the monster cube. 1-point perspective. Draw a horizon line in the middle. However, instead of putting vanishing points out to the sides, you're putting 1 point in the middle. You can adjust where this point is as long as you keep track of where your vanishing point has been established so things remain in perspective. In this example though, we're keeping things simple and sticking to the center. Then we're going to create the edges of our buildings by creating a big X through our vanishing point. Next, you'll be establishing some sides of your buildings. In this case, we'll say the entrance sides of buildings. You do this by creating variations of vertical lines all the way down until you hit your vanishing point. It is good to add variety of widths to indicate different size buildings. Next, we will be adjusting the height of the building, starting always from your vanishing point. This is to ensure your image remains in perspective. So with your ruler and throughout, begin setting up a variety of different heights for your buildings. After that, you will add parallel lines to your horizon to make edges of your buildings. Now you should start to see some buildings taking shape. After that, we will add a sidewalk. So you're going to start from your vanishing point, determine the size of your sidewalk, and then, here we're going to try to keep it relatively within scale of a real sidewalk. Adding in a thinner line beside it will create that curb part of the sidewalk. After that, we're going to add in our doors and our windows. Doors are generally the same height, so it is valid to keep your ruler in the same location as long as you are angled from your vanishing point. These doors will remain in perspective. Then you'll add in those vertical lines to the base of where your sidewalk and building meet. Voila! Now we've got doors. Now your people have a place to run and possibly escape the monster that's coming down the street. You can repeat the door process to add windows. Keep in mind, you don't have to focus too much on details if you know where your monster will be blocking visual from. If your monster is stomping down the street, there might be some things not worth spending a whole lot of time drawing. I like to add all my seasoning flavor details in layers as well. That's why it can be helpful to loosely play with some ideas within some small sketch boxes before setting up your kaiju scene, or any scene. When I know I have to be meticulous, I like to know what I'm being meticulous about. I see sketches as little post-it notes for me when I'm playing in the final piece, Playgrounds.
And there we have it, folks. Perspective and layout. Thank you again, Rich, for guiding us through our 2-point perspective and 1-point perspective and mashing it all together. We really appreciate it. And everyone, I hope that you learned a couple of new things or something that you didn't consider and you can put in your back pocket that benefits your next piece in some shape, way, or form. Tune in next week. We're going to dig even farther into perspective because we're going to start doing things like adding in lampposts. How do you keep all of your subject matter within perspective? So we're going to go into next week, week 3, landscape and scale. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.